All right, let's begin. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our, what month is it? November? November Potpourri. It's been that kind of a week, month. I think I know. All right. So welcome, everyone. So tonight we have a varied list of presentations, so I don't want to get right into them. I think I should announce tonight that one of us was presented with an asteroid yesterday. And I'd like to congratulate, this is sort of a new member to the club. Betty got an asteroid yesterday. Based on her many years of contribution to the Toronto Centre, to the Mississauga Centre, to the national body. And so we're pretty excited about that. So February's Potpourri will be on her asteroid. So we'll send directions. So that's pretty exciting news. And in fact, you'll see an announcement from the national office that in fact, many names that you recognize were awarded. And this is just a program that they've been running for several years, just to recognize volunteers in the society. So we've got a variety of talks tonight, and we're going to conclude with a couple of recaps of the recent solar eclipse. Who saw some of the partial eclipse here? Yeah, it was kind of, yeah. So the fact is that it was cloudy on that day here means it's going to be sunny on April 8th. So, and I hear due to some sort of really unique astronomical event that no one's ever seen before, is that the moon's orbit was just shifted like a few seconds of arc, which has shifted the path of totality about 50 kilometers north. So so it'll be in Mississauga. So, you know, yes, yeah. So that's pretty exciting news too. Our first speaker is Robin Metcalf. Many of you, Robin is an astronomer at York, but also she spent some time up in Killarney Provincial Park with the program that they have up there, and she is going to tell us all about it. Robin? Apparently it works. So there's the microphone, and you're all set.
And the button that I pressed to advance just right and left, right?
Right and left.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay, thank you. And congratulations, Betty. That's fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about the Astronomer in Residence program at Killarney Provincial Park. The program has been running for about 10 years, so some of you may have heard of it or participated in it. But 2 years ago, York University got involved as a partner, and that's how I heard about it. So I will tell you about what the program looks like now, and also my adventures as the resident about a month ago. So just some background. Right now, the program is run by Bruce Waters, who is the original founder of the Killarney Park Observatory, and Elena Hyde, who is the current director of the York University Observatory. And so together they have set up the equipment up there for this program. They maintain it. And Elena administers the program as far as taking in applications, interviewing the applicants, and then putting together a schedule. And she also maintains all of the online information. So they operate things behind the scenes, but then once you get up there, there's the Killarney Park staff who are on site to help you run the programming. Okay, so what the program looks like is that you can apply for anywhere from 1 to 3 week time slot, and then you get a free stay at Killarney Provincial Park. You have to get yourself up there. It's about a 4-hour drive north from here. You get free lodging in a private furnished apartment. It's right next to the domes. I say rustic. It's just not fancy, but it's perfectly fine. It's got a kitchen, a bathroom with running water, a living room, a bedroom with 2 little twin beds. So it's perfectly functional, just, very no frills. If I had more time, I would tell you about how I didn't get that apartment. I ended up staying in staff quarters. It's a whole long story, but maybe another time. But normally this is what you get, is this private apartment. And you have 24/7 access to the observatory complex up there. So it's closed, it's to the public, it's entirely for your use whenever you want it. The only time they open it to the public is during the public viewing sessions that you run. And of course, you're under the amazingly dark skies up there. Killarney Provincial Park is a dark sky preserve. And of course, free parking and access to all of the park facilities, the beautiful beaches and the amazing trails that are up there. So what the equipment that they have up there, they have 2 domes, and the domes have been named in with Anishinaabe words. So the smaller dome is called the Wasa de Bobbing Dome, which means seeing far. And it houses the original 10-inch telescope. It's entirely manual, and it's got a solar filter on it. So it's set up primarily for daytime solar viewing. And then the larger dome is called Kichi Wasa de Bobbing, which means seeing very far. And it's got a fully automated 15-inch telescope. Mounted on it is a 5-inch refractor. And then there's 2 different cameras that you can interchange depending on what you want to image. So these gorgeous images were taken by Bruce Waters using the equipment up there. And if you go to the Wikipedia site on the Killarney Park Observatory, you'll see a huge gallery of fantastic astrophotography, mostly by Bruce. Okay, so to earn your keep, what you have to do each week is this. First of all, you have to deliver a 1-hour astronomy-themed lecture to a general audience. This is done outdoors at night in an amphitheater, and I'll show you pictures of what that looks like. Okay, so the first thing is the one mandatory item. Then you have to choose 2 more from a few options. And one option is that you can host an evening drop-in session with the 16-inch telescope. So this looks just like what we do at the Riverview sessions, where people come and they line up, and one by one you let them into the dome and you show them something cool and talk to them about what they're looking at. Apparently they're very well attended, like 100 or so people. Right, so that's one option. Another is that you can do a daytime session. You can do a session in the smaller dome for solar viewing and look at sunspots. Or you can do a session there's a little nature center where they have a meteorite collection. So if that's your area, you can talk about that kind of stuff as well. Or you can take park guests on a star hopping tour of the night sky from the main beach. And then last item is also mandatory. So you have to blog every day. You're supposed to post your photos and tell tales of what the experience has been like for you. And that all goes online at at a site that is maintained by York. Okay, so to apply, the application opens every January. And you apply online, and you are expected to have a fluency in general astronomy knowledge, stargazing, and telescope operations. And you also should have some experience in astronomy outreach and presenting to a large audience. So most of the people in this group, if not all of you, are certainly qualified to apply. Right, so you apply online. There's a form that you fill out where you talk about your expertise in these areas. And then Elena will contact you and set up an interview. And during the interview, she asks you for some kind of evidence of your outreach experience. She might ask you for some PowerPoint slides that you've done, or a recording of a talk you've given, or maybe just a list of talks you've given, that kind of thing. Right. So yeah, every January, the application thing goes out. As soon as it comes to be my email, I'm happy to forward it on to this group. Okay, so onto my adventures. So I got up there on Monday, October 2nd. In the late afternoons. My plan was to go into the dome the next day once I had many hours of daylight to try to figure things out. So I just did a quick trail, the shortest trail that they have. I have mild in quotes because I think a lot of people would agree that the rating system for the Killarney trails is underestimated. I found them kind of challenging. Mild to me means a trail where you are upright the whole time, and that there are no trails like that there. You're always, there's always some component where you're holding on to a tree or you're scrambling on rocks or something like that. So I would have called this one mild to moderate. There was definitely some steep elevation changes. But you can see I was up there at like the perfect time of year where the colors were just incredible. And same trail, just a little bit further on looking west so I could get a sunset shot. Okay, so that was day one, and then getting settled in my quarters. Day two was I spent the morning in the dome getting acquainted with everything. And the Blake Nancaro, very much missed, of course, he actually wrote the documentation that's up there. And he did a fabulous job. They've basically created, it's like a turnkey setup. You walk into this dome, and within an hour, you go through his step-by-step instructions. It's all illustrated, very short and concise and clear, and you can get everything going. Like, he's really made a huge contribution to the program. So right, that was the morning. It was lots of fun. I was very much looking forward to the evening. I spent the afternoon on another trail, the Chickanishing Trail. I would have called this one moderate to difficult for sure. Very, very rocky scrambles. Yeah, steep climbs for sure. Beautiful views though of Georgian Bay. This just gives you a sense of like, that's the trail, right? So, you're often like, am I on the trail? I don't know. They have these trail markers. You can see that red one there. I think that they purposely spaced them apart just where your panic starts to kick in, and then you see it. And sometimes the trail markers are on the ground as opposed to trees, so you don't know where to look. I had the All Trails app on my phone, and there were a few times that I went off trail and it would steer me back on. So I highly recommend it. But it's so much fun and fabulous. Quite remote. Like you will often not see other humans, at least at this time of year. So really, really beautiful. Okay, nighttime in the dome. This was awesome. So the dome is set up with something called plate solving technology. I think that's somewhat new, but maybe some of you have experience with this. It is so cool. So what happens is you turn on the dome and you turn on the telescope and you just take a random star field. Doesn't matter where it is. The telescope has no idea what it's looking at. You just have to make it focused and nice and sharp. So you send that star field to this software that's on the laptop, and then you hit this button, solve. And what the software does is it does pattern recognition, and it matches up the star field with its catalog of stars, and it figures out where it is, or at least tries. And so then it'll spit out some RAN deck and say, okay, this is what we're focused on right now. So once you've done that, then you can say, okay, I want to go to some other target. So I picked the Ring Nebula. And then what it does, so it computes the offset between where it thinks it is and the Ring Nebula. It slews the telescope over there. And then it takes a picture and it shows it to you. And usually in the round one, it won't be exactly centered, but it will be in the field. And then it knows that it hasn't found it perfectly. Again, it will do another solve and compute the offset between where M57 should be. And then it will keep doing this in iterations. And you'll see the pictures popping up on the screen. And each time you see that it's getting closer and closer to the center, usually takes like 3 or 4 tries. And then ultimately it will end up with your target right at the center. Once that's happened, then you look in the 16-inch and you'll see that it's either perfectly centered in the field or it's in the field but it's not perfectly centered, in which case you just have to align the 5-inch to it, and then you do another solve, and then everything is perfectly centered together. And then at that point, you can just type in targets and it surfs all around the sky. So it's really, really fun. Okay, so did that, and then I was just getting acquainted with the with how that works and working on getting better, sharper and sharper images. And while I was looking for things to move to, I noticed just by eye that the star Fomalhaut, it was very low and bright in the sky, so bright that it was visibly scintillating, like to the extent that you can see the color changes, right? And so I thought it would be cool to look at that through the 16-inch telescope, because I'd never done that before, and slewed over to it. And looking at it through the 60-inch, sorry, it was just spectacular. I don't know if anyone's done this before, but it looks like this psychedelic strobe ball. It's just so cool. And I realize, like, from an astronomical perspective, maybe that's not the most interesting thing to look at. But if it's, you know, the general public and they look in and they're definitely surprised by that, and then it gives you an opportunity to talk about, you know, how light works and how it interacts with the atmosphere and what twinkling means and why you see the bright colors. So it's, you know, it's a cool object for a teaching moment. Also, you can do some cool, like, astro art with these objects. So what you can do is you can throw them out of focus, and then you see the, you know, these circles of different colors. This doesn't do it any justice, but this is, so thrown it out of focus. I'm looking at it now on the laptop through the 5-inch refractor, and this was just filming it with my phone. But what you can do is you can take a whole bunch of short exposure photos, and then each exposure, if it's short enough, it's going to be a different color. So I tried to do that with Fomalhaut. Fomalhaut's not the best star for this kind of thing, because the brighter the star, the better this works. And the other problem was that the capturing software, the shortest exposure you could do is 1 second. You really want to go shorter than that. But this is the best I could do with what I had. But other people have done some really cool stuff. Yeah, so this is Sirius, which is a great star for this kind of thing. A whole bunch of these out of focus shots, and then all combined together. So I love this photo. Right. Okay, so at this point, I was very wary of the fact that the weather report was showing me that clouds were going to come in and basically stay there until I went home the following week. So I was really worried that this was going to be my only night to get a Milky Way shot. So I ran outside, got my DSLR stuff set up, took this very rushed shot. But the Milky Way was so beautifully clear. It was just incredible. And fog was starting to come in, went back into the dome, and just, you know, very quickly the stars started to twinkle out, and I you know, got nothing. So had to pack up and go home. Still a lot of fun that one night. Okay, next day, I did another trail, the Cranberry Bog Trail, mild to moderate. I would have called that mild to difficult. It's mostly you're upright for almost all of it, except there's this one bit at the end that's super, super steep where, like, you can imagine having to, like, call a grown-up. It's and get some help getting out of there. But other than that, just gorgeous, mostly woodsy compared to the other trails, less rocky, and some beautiful boggy bits in there as well. Okay, sorry. So that was day 3, nighttime. I did go back to the dome for, I don't know, 20 minutes. It was really cloudy. I was hoping to get some spots here and there, but sorry, not 20 minutes. I was there for quite a while waiting, but it was not clear enough to get anything. Okay, next day I went to Science North in Sudbury, which was amazing. Hopefully many of you have been there. Best science center I have ever been to. It's such a cool building. I think it's 4 stories. And so it's built around this staircase where there's this 20-meter fin whale skeleton that spans from the bottom all the way up to the top. So it kind of follows you up the stairs. Every exhibit is so clever and interactive. Like, as an example, you can match up feces to its animal. There's an infrared projector that you can play around with. Your typical black hole machine that all science centers have. This was so cool, scale model of the ISS, and it gives you a sense of how big it is compared to an astronaut. So I don't know, can you see my mouse moving? Yeah, so the tiny little black thing there is the astronaut, right? Really gives you perspective of this amazing achievement of humanity. Oh my God, I could have spent all day here. So you build slot cars out of, like, Tinker toys, and then you can race them. There's 2 of these tracks. Like, kids just probably lose their mind on this kind of thing. So cool. This was just brilliant, I thought, as well, the nature exchange. So let's say you're around Sudbury and you find a cool rock or a cool shellfish. You bring it in, you exchange it for something that they have, and then they display your item. So again, like I could see like kids and schools and programming around that would just be so awesome. Okay, so same thing the previous night, too cloudy. I didn't even bother going in the dome. It was just, it was really cold and cloudy. And Friday was the day planned for my star hopping on the beach, which I was so excited for. So this is the beautiful spot where you do this. You could see the day was cloudy-ish, got a lot worse as the day got on. But I was anticipating this. And so I came up with this plan that I was so excited about, where what I was going to do was once people arrived, I was going to get them hooked up on Stellarium, or if they didn't have a phone, I had a stack of the Rask planispheres, which I still have. And what I was going to do was basically simulate the night sky, where I would do my star hopping plan and they would follow along on their phone or on the planisphere. So showing them what the sky looks like behind the clouds, talking about all the cool, stories about the objects that I'm explaining. And then the idea was that the next clear night that they had, they would now know how to find stuff, and they would be motivated to, because they would know all this cool stuff about the objects that we talked about. So that was the plan. But about an hour before it was supposed to start, there was a downpour. It just ridiculously fast and loud rain. And so the park staff canceled it. I was so disappointed. But this was what I was going to talk about, showing them how you can navigate around the sky with your hands and fingers, pointing out bright constellations, where the zodiac strip is, what it means, what your zodiac sign means, why your zodiac signs are changing. I was going to talk about Polaris, how it's a triple star system, what it would be like to live in a triple star system. What is going to happen to Polaris in the future. And then moving on to Capella, same thing, talking about how its life cycle is similar to what will happen to our sun. Moving on to Saturn and Jupiter, which were both really bright at that time, what it means to be a gas giant, why their moons are so cool and possible sources of extraterrestrial life. And then moving on to the Milky Way, where we should see it, why it looks the way it does from our perspective out in Milky Way suburbia. And then I was going to show them how to find Andromeda with binoculars. That's just cool, because then you can start talking about galactic cannibalism, which everyone loves to talk about. And then larger scale stuff, how us and M31 are part of the local group, which is part of the local supercluster, which is part of all the superclusters that make up this crazy, ginormous universe. So that was my plan, but it won't go bad. I'll save it for next year. And I did talk to Randy about maybe, on a cloudy night at Riverview that we could do something like this. Okay. The next day was the day for my public talk. And this is where it's done, in this absolutely gorgeous amphitheater, like the nicest classroom I have ever been in my life. Again, unfortunately, rained. So it was cold, it was rainy. The problem with the rain was that there's that shed that you're right in front of, and it's so loud, and even if people are under their umbrellas, they can't hear you talking. So, and the park staff are experienced with this, and so they had to cancel it. I was brokenhearted. I had worked so hard on this talk, and basically it's about the science of an aurora, but also it's all framed within sort of this astro sleuthing story about a recent discovery of what might be the first recorded sighting of an aurora, and a little bit of mystery about how we even suspect that that's the case. But yeah, again, I'll save it, maybe speakers night or next year. We'll see. It was a lot of fun to make. Okay, the next day, this was the day for my drop-in observing session. This was the weather report I woke up to: rain, snow, and cold. So it was canceled right away. And I was supposed to stay one more night, but my blog entry on that day is just tap out. That was it. I was done. But the one last thing I did before I left that day was I hadn't yet seen a bear, and I had heard that this was that there were bear sightings everywhere. So one of the park staff told me that the best way to maximize your chance of seeing a bear is to go to the dump. So I went to the Killarney dump. And some of you might remember that about a year ago, I unfortunately struck and killed a bear on the highway. So this was an opportunity for closure for me and sort of one-sided reconciliation with the bears. Anyway, it was cool to see them. They didn't pay any attention to me. They were packing up for their hibernation and very busy. Okay, so that's it. If you're interested in the program, that top link will get you to the main site where you'll see all the application materials. And the bottom link will take you to the blog site. The blog is really cool because it really gives you a sense of just the day-to-day experiences of all of the different residences. And Blake Nancaro was the first residence not this past year, but the year before. And so his blog is featured. It's really nice reading. So you might want to give it a look. That's it. Any questions?
Well, when are you be doing it next year so we can schedule our observing trip differently?
I am definitely going to apply next year, but I think I will apply in September. Yes. Yeah. But yeah, you know, it sounds like such a dream and that it would be so competitive, but in fact, there were many empty slots just this last summer. So if it interests you, definitely apply.
How many slots are there?
Well, it depends if people book 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but it runs all the way from, I think they started in June and it goes until mid-October, until Stars Over Killarney. And that's the last of it. Yeah.
How many people were in October?
Sorry, how many?
How many people were at
Yeah, so I didn't give any of mine. However, I heard from the from the other residents that anywhere from like 75 to 150. Yeah, it's really well attended. People really get into the stuff. And on the beach, same thing, like over 100 people are come down there. Yeah. Yes. So not the 16-inch, the 10-inch, the manual one used to be open to the public. And it wasn't when I was there, but it might still be. I'm not sure. Probably if you check the website, it will tell you.
Alan? Yeah, 100 to 150 people, and they're all lining up to look at something on 16.
Yeah, no, it is a 2-hour slot. So I think because I didn't experience it, I don't really know what that looks like, but I did talk to some others about it. There's park staff, like 2 or 3 park staff there, maybe walking up and down and talking to people. I was told to bring a bunch of planispheres so that they could be given out and you could entertain people that way. Okay. Yeah. It's probably just a lot of standing around. Yeah. Ah, wow. But you know what? I forgot that Elena told me that when she goes up there, she sets up a projector and hooks it up to the dome. So at least when you're in line, you can watch it. Yeah.
Has there been any consideration of one of the team of the astronomers plural? Let's say, for instance, 5 or 7 members of the RAS off the van go up there.
I'm sure that they would jump all over that. It would be way better because there's so many people that come, and that way we can spread out. And I'm sure they would love that. I think it's a great idea.
Sharing the responsibility between 2 people.
And the Sudbury Center is right there.
Yeah, there is a idea of that already.
Okay, yeah, a group thing would be amazing. And there are larger quarters, which I ended up staying in. So, and there's also tons of room for camping and just in and around the dome. So a large group thing for sure would be awesome. Yep.
By yourself?
I did, but because I was in these staff quarters, I did have some loud partying teenagers with me, but that was just an isolated experience that only I had because the water was shut off the week that I was there. Every other resident stayed in the private apartment. Oh, there's no, there's lots of people up there. Yeah, so you're in the sort of complex where all the staff are, and they're always milling around.
It's dark enough, yeah. Yeah, this is good. Yeah, this is good. Okay, we're gonna keep the lights on because for some of it, I actually have to refer to some of my notes. So if you don't mind. All right, so I'm back with another trip, prologue or whatever it's called. And so this time I want to talk about a visit to the European Space Agency, specifically ESTEC in the Netherlands. We went to the Netherlands and Belgium in August as a family, and we did a day trip out of Amsterdam to this facility. I didn't know much about the facility when we went, but let me tell you, it was quite an experience, and I have great memories. So if you ever visit Amsterdam and if this talk interests you, perhaps that goes on to your itinerary for the future. All right, so let's get into it. Before we get into ESTEC itself, I just wanted to give a bit of an overview of the European Space Agency. The European Space Agency was founded in 1975 and with 10 member states, including Belgium and Germany and France. Currently, it has 22 member states, associate members, and has cooperation agreements with a number of countries. Canada is a big partner for the European Space Agency. In fact, when we went into ESTEC, Canada, you could see the Canadian flag, you could see Call Out to Canada, quite prominent through the center. So of course, it was a proud moment for our family. ESA's budget for 2023 was 7 billion euros. It's headquartered in Paris. There are 7 centers focusing on space research, operations, manned flight, specifically ESTEC, or the European Space Research and Technology Center in the Netherlands is where we will be focusing on, and that's highlighted up on the slide there. So how do you get to ESTEC? So like I mentioned, it's in Amsterdam, it's by Amsterdam, easily accessible by metro and train. We didn't have a vehicle, 1.25 hours to get out there. A little bit of planning will get you there for 10 o'clock when the center opens. There is an entry fee to get in, and I'll get into that in a second as well. Why is this important? Why do we care? Well, most ESA projects are actually born and go through phases of development in this very center. So if you hear of a project that European Space Agency is involved in, this is where it happens. This is the technical center, and it is the largest site of ESA, and about 2,000 specialists work in here. So that's kind of cool. I didn't know that again when I went there. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to actually highlight, you see on the right, on our right, the bus, that's the bus telling you kind of what the stops are. The last stop was ESTEC. So I took a picture of that, and the map you'll see the ESTEC Center is very close to the North Sea. And there's a gorgeous beach. So once you visit ESTEC, you can maybe make your way out to this beautiful beach and spend the rest of the day there. We went to another beach. We couldn't get to this one. We went to another beach. Netherlands has some gorgeous beaches as well in the summer. All right. So there are 2 parts to my talk. The first one is Space Expo. At the entrance, when you arrive, you'll see a model of the Ariane rocket. And as you go to pay and pick up your tickets, you see a wall of astronaut autographs. Most notably, Buzz Aldrin's autograph is on the wall for everybody to admire. And there was quite a few astronaut autographs there, but the Buzz Aldrin one that stood out to me. The next, once you enter the space station, the Space Expo, this is one of the first things that greets you. Some of you may be familiar with it. This is the Moon Watch, or the Omega Speed Master, which was worn by Buzz Aldrin and has been to the moon. Well, not this watch, but what he wore, but this model. And it's also been worn during the first spacewalk by Gemini astronauts. The story goes that the watch that was worn by Buzz Aldrin was actually, when he got back from the moon, was on its way to the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, and it vanished on the way. And the mystery remains unsolved to this date. So Buzz Aldrin used to call his watch Speedy, and unfortunately, it's lost to us. What I was going to mention, Christmas is coming up. So if you have a watch on your list, perhaps the Omega Speedmaster, which are worn by astronauts, is something perhaps you want to put on your list. All right. The next one is space objects from space or have been in space. The moon rock. There's a moon rock. You can get up close and personal. It's in a little glass pyramid. You can get very close to it. This was brought back by the Apollo 17 astronauts in 1972. Honestly, when I looked at it, I was a bit underwhelmed. It looked like a concrete block to me. But hey, I was looking at a moon rock that was brought back from space, so that's kind of cool. The next thing was an iron meteorite. You could go, you could touch it. It's pretty hard stuff. This meteorite fell in Argentina, weighs 17 kilograms, likely fell to Earth 6,000 years ago. So it's about yay big. And, you can touch it. It stands on its own. And it's believed that this was part of a bigger asteroid, which almost was 100,000 kilograms coming down. So again, 6,000 years ago. The next one was really cool stuff. I don't know if you recognize this, but this is the Hubble solar panels. And these actually were in space for 3.5 years. And when they suffered damage, they were brought back to ESA for analysis because of debris, space debris hitting them. And if you see closely, if you see this here closely, this right here, this little hole, that was actually because of space debris hitting those solar panels. And it's so cool. You get up really close. It's obviously behind a glass, but you can get very close and you can see a lot of detail. By the way, these pictures are all mine, so you can see how close you can get to some of this, and you can see a lot of detail in every one of these artifacts. The next one here is a real spy satellite, a Russian spy satellite, which was actually up in space for 2 weeks. And the charred, burned area is, or the charring on that satellite is because of re-entry back into Earth. And the lower picture shows us the cameras that were on this satellite. I tried to research and look up how ESA got a hold of this, but there's no information that I could find. But in any case, it's there. It takes up a large space. It's quite big. And this is the real deal. It's an actual satellite, which I thought again was super cool. The next thing we'll move on to is space flight. Oh, I think that's kind of blocking my view there, but the Ariane 1 engines. So I don't know if anybody has seen the Ariane 1 rocket engines. The picture on the bottom right is me standing under one of those engines and trying to look up. That's just one engine. It's quite overwhelming how large these engines are. But this is the original Ariane 1 engine block. Ariane 1 was launched 11 times between 1979 and 1986, with one mission to Jato in 1986 to the Halley's Comet. So I thought, again, this was super cool. We hear about Ariane being such a powerful rocket. To see something up close, an original piece like that, was amazing. The next one was the opposite, tiny little satellite. It's called a smart satellite or a hyper scout. This smart satellite detects heat in cities and algae growth. There's AI tech on board. So what it does is it takes pictures, it processes them in space, and then sends those pictures back to Earth, and they're ready to use. And it's really, really, really small. And it's really small. It's only this big. So again, really, really cool stuff, and to see what ESA is actually involved in. So it was interesting that Robin called out the International Space Station. ESA actually has the full model. You can walk through it. So this is me. There's actually, you walk into it, and the Earth behind is actually moving. As some of you may know, there's an ISS app you can get, and you can actually see live. If you haven't downloaded the app, look it up. You can actually see live on your app where, from the ISS, the view from ISS. In any case, I don't know if this was linked into the app or not, but certainly it was simulated. The Earth movement was simulated. So this was, kind of cool for me to go in. There's two components to the ISS. There's a United States component and a Russian component. The United States component is called United States Orbital Segment, or USOS, and is run by United States as well as other countries, including Canada and Japan. And then you have the Russian side, much smaller, I found, and it's called the Russian Orbital Segment, or ROS. One of the interesting thing was there was a sleeping pod, and you can see how the astronauts might sleep in the space station. So some quick facts about the ISS. The ISS circles the Earth about 93 times in a day, completing 15.5 orbits per day. The station, like I said, is divided into the two. What I don't have over here, but again, that was really cool. There's this actual Soyuz simulator that you can sit in, and it actually simulates launch and land. And you can actually sit in that simulator, and that landing, I mean, Anika and I sat in it, and it was so hard, the landing coming down, and you see everything happening in front of you. And yeah, I mean, it was quite an experience. So there was a couple of other interactive pieces in this exhibition. Moving on, so that was the first part. The second part is the space train. So now we've talked about the museum. You have to buy the museum ticket in order to get into ESTEC. So everything I've talked about, ESTEC's been involved in, other than the Russian spy satellite, I think. So what you do is you book your ticket. When you book your ticket, you can opt for this. There's 3 times a day or 4 times a day this train takes you in. Tours are given in English and in Dutch. One car is English and the other car is Dutch. There's 2 tour guides that go with you. You have to stay with the tour guide because of security at all times. It's airport-like security. When you enter the ESTEC facility, you bring your passport. When you bring your passport, you actually go through immediate clearance as you're trying to enter ESTEC. So there's security, there's airport-style security, they scan your passport, and if you're clear to go, you can then go into that center. So those are some of the logistics. The tour is about 1 hour and 15 minutes. And like I said, you stay with your guide the whole time. They're very knowledgeable folks. So I could not take we had to leave our phones behind and our cameras behind. You couldn't take it into the center. But what I did do is I made a lot of notes as to what we saw. And then I had to come back and find pictures and put the rest of the talk together using other materials and my own notes. So I'm just going to talk about some of the highlights of ESA's contributions. The first one is Gaia. It was launched in 2013 from French Guyana. Gaia is creating a precise 3-dimensional map of the Milky Way and beyond, mapping their motions, luminosity, temperature, and composition. It's stationed at the L2 Lagrangian point. So this is a very famous one. I think most of us know about it. The next one, and I'll talk about that, and I'll bring up some pictures, was Euclid. Euclid was just launched in July 2023, so just a month before we got to ESA. It's designed to explore the evolution of the dark universe. So for all our cosmologist friends, I think this is a really cool thing that they've done. It will make a 3D map of the universe by observing billions of galaxies out to 10 billion light years across more than 1/3 of the sky. By observing the universe evolving over the past 10 billion years, Euclid will reveal how the universe has expanded and how the structure has formed over cosmic history. And from this, the astronomers can infer the properties of dark energy, dark matter, and gravity to reveal a more precise nature. So this is the mission. That's the mission objective, is around the dark universe. Just this last, I think, week, Euclid, we received a few pictures, 5 images from Euclid. And these are the 5 that have come up. And I know it's not too super dark, but do take a moment to look at it. They're super cool. You'll see the spiral galaxy, the Horsehead Nebula, a globular cluster, the Perseus cluster, and an irregular galaxy. So this is on the ESA's website. So if you need a little bit more information, I highly recommend you go take a look at the picture. I don't think my slides are doing them justice. When I looked at them up close, they were so gorgeous. The next one is, I'm going to highlight the work that's underway, ESA's work that's in progress. So the first one is ESA's Mars rover, Rosalind Franklin. This is currently on hold. Why is it on hold? The partnership is between Roscosmos and ESA. And because of the war in Russia and Ukraine, this project is on hold until further notice. However, we were able to see, this picture is mine actually. So there were 2 models, one within the Aztec Center, one in the Space Expo. So I was able to take a picture of ESA's, Mars rover. The next one, we got very up close and personal to the real thing. Again, I didn't have a photo, like a camera with me, but this is this is the Thales glider or the Space Rider. This is, if you think about it, more like the space shuttle. So ESA wants its own, returnable vehicle, go into low Earth orbit, bring payload to low Earth orbit, and then make a return. And so they want a reusable, affordable solution. And this is the Thales glider that they're working on. We got very up close to it. We actually touched it. It's really, really cool to see. This is the work in progress. So clearly, the European Space Agency is very active in space exploration. They have partnered with a number of countries, and all the projects that you see up there, they are being worked on either with ESA or in collaboration with other partners. The Aztec Center Netherlands is at the heart of all of this technology. And so that is the really cool thing about the center here. And the last thing I wanted to share in conclusion is a couple of personal pictures from our family visit to the Netherlands. So this is the beautiful country in the month of August. So we did a fishing village. We did the beach, like I mentioned, canal cruise. We went up the Atom Tower. We did the Anne Frank House. We also did some windmills. We had a lot of variety of different types of food, and we had a whole lot of fun. So with that, thank you from the Netherlands.
Okay, I'm going to move right on to our last talk before the break. If you have any questions for Swapna, maybe you can grab her during the break. So Ron McNaughton has a few short presentations here on a couple different topics. And after Ron's talk, we'll take a short break. So Ron, it's...
I wasn't going to make much effort to see the eclipse because the weather forecast was lousy. And also it looks to me like we're only going to get wait a minute. Gord Reif and my third astronomy group, I'm also part of the Toronto Centre, a group took pictures near Gravenhurst. And, it's not that much of an eclipse. And at first I wasn't going to do anything, and I was driving up to my cottage, and unfortunately we're selling, so I couldn't take any astronomy gear because I took a whole bunch of stuff back and all this sort of stuff. And driving past Barrie, I thought, my God, it's clear. Well, sort of clear. There were clouds and whatnot. So I have a goal to get a certain type of picture. And I think you've seen this where if you're in a forest, you get pictures, the dapples on the floor match the shape of the sun, or it also can be against a wall. Driving up, I pulled off on the side of Highway 11, and boy, do those cars ever whiz past. And I walked into a forest, and I couldn't see anything on the floor. I don't know whether it's because it was slightly windy and the leaves were moving all over the place or whatever, but it wasn't that successful. I had this piece of cardboard and I held it up, and I have about 5 pictures of cardboard, and that's the only one that shows even the hintest of an eclipse, and I don't think that's an eclipse. So that was a failure. And I don't know whether the problem was that the surface was not smooth, like the sidewalk was nice and smooth for the image at the beginning, or the forest wasn't tall enough, or I don't know. Anyway, it didn't work out the way I wanted. But I also visited, drove off the road on a side road, and I saw clouds coming, so I figured I'd better get out here. And I tried to get into a forest, but it was so dense, there was nothing on the bottom. And then I was near a house where I stopped. So I got this piece of cardboard and I just punched a hole through it with a pen. And actually I did this first, but there. And oh, wait a minute. I was just going to say, and I couldn't hold it high enough to get my camera. I'm not very good at reaching. So what I did is I saw this car drive in and I saw a lady get out and I said, could you help me? So she walked towards me, which really scared me. I mean, nobody would do that in Toronto, right? Anyway, she walked close to me. She was about 50 feet away because I'm worried. I know that people are worried. And I said, I'm an amateur astronomer and there's a partial eclipse of the sun right now. And I want to get a picture. Do you mind holding this piece of cardboard high and face it so it's perpendicular to the sun? And she ended up moving it around. And I actually took a picture against, you see the little dot, I don't know, is this? Yeah, you see that? And it actually shows a little bump out of it, but it's far from what I wanted. But, you know, c'est la vie. This is zoomed in a little bit more. And I even played with contrast, but it didn't quite turn out. But, oh, I did a calculation, and if it's about 1.5 meters away, the sun with a 0.5 degree will be about this diameter, 1.5 centimeters. Anyway, this was planning for next April 8th. And I'm just putting in a plug, a group of us, John and some others. We're talking about renting a van, driving somewhere in the midst of the States, maybe in Missouri, something like that. Check the weather forecast, and we might drive to Texas if that's where it's clear. We might drive back to Ontario if it's clear here. But this is our way of maximizing the chance we see the eclipse. And we've had a few meetings. And anyway, so that's it for that. Very brief. And okay, do you mind shifting to the other one? Unless there's some brief questions, and then. The second one was based on an article I read in the Economist. And this is all about discovery of life. And they mentioned a talk in Harvard by Dr. David Charbonneau. So it sounds like he was the scientist that organized this big conference, and a whole bunch of people were riveted by his talk. And it has this fancy name. And then he said, what it's really about is this. Are you ready? Small angry stars and the many godforsaken rocks that orbit them. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about stars. Then I'm going to talk about transit, habitable zones, then transits, and many of you already know it, so it's a bit of a review, but I'm just going through some basic astronomy, and then I'm getting at what the discoveries are. First of all, there's a classification system of different stars and why the letters are like that. But I've heard that astronomers have an acronym to it, and it goes something like OB, fine, either guy or girl, depending on your interest, kiss me. And that somehow astronomers can remember the order. I couldn't remember it without that. Now, this is from Wikipedia, and the biggest stars of these are main sequence stars. They're stars like Betelgeuse that are no longer just burning hydrogen, and they're now different, but these are main sequence stars. So O stars are blue and they're massive. And I didn't even see a common star that we see that's an O. And then you go to B stars that are a little smaller, up to 2, down to 2 solar masses. Then A stars are white and almost to solar mass size. And then you have fine stars or F stars that are yellowish white, around the solar, a little bit bigger than the solar mass. And then the G stars or good stars, and I really think they are good stars. They're the ones around the solar mass, a little above us and 20% below our mass. And then you get to the KISS or K stars that are smaller, down to about half of our mass, our sun's mass. And then you have the Me stars or M stars that are the lowest temperature, the smallest mass, down to 8% of the sun, and they're orangish red. Now, the Drake equation says there's so many stars, therefore there must be some life somewhere. Well, if it turns out that M and K stars that are most of the stars in the solar system, that kind of affects the amount of bit. And the M stars are the ones that are, he's called small angry stars. The angry, they give off, for some reason, that size of star gives off all sorts of solar flares, which affects any planet around them. Now, habitable zone. The lower one is a G star, which a good star. And roughly our habitable zone where you can have liquid water, roughly from Venus to Mars. And but when you have a smaller star with weaker gravity and weaker energy from it, you have a smaller habitable zone. And the M stars are much, much smaller. And so whatever habitable planet there might be is really close. And it turns out that the measure of the X-ray radiation from the star, if ours is called 1, the M stars are 400 times more, partially because the habitable planet is closer and partially because the star is so angry or active. Okay, transits. Venus's orbit is tilted a little bit compared to ours. And if in March we have Venus passing us on the inside, inferior conjunction, then it's tilted up and we are looking way above the sun for Venus. But if we see Venus at an inferior conjunction in early June or early December, we might see a transit. It's relatively rare, and then they're lined up. Now, I looked at it, and it turns out there are about 10 times more transits of Mercury than there are Venus, even though it's only a little bit closer. It's about half the Venus radius from the sun. So there's something about transits that we're more likely to see them when they're really close. Unfortunately, where we can find transits is when the planets are close, which probably means they're around angry small stars. Okay. This was published just after the Webb telescope had about a month of operation. And I was actually disappointed with this. It is real data. Can you see the cursor? Yes. This is real data. And when the planet goes in front of the star, the brightness decreases. And from the amount it goes down, you can work out the size of the planet. And for reasons I don't understand, they can also work out the mass of the planet. I'm not quite sure how they do that. Notice the noise that comes with it, but also the planet blocks the main light, but the atmosphere has another effect, and it's going to absorb certain infrared frequencies, like a greenhouse effect there. And when they subtracted, they actually got this data that wasn't bad for, red is what, 5.5 microns, but this is beyond red, infrared. It isn't bad for the short infrared, but when you get to longer infrared, it's really noisy. Now, you can get around that by doing lots of transits. So they take a transit, then they do another one next time, and so on. But it takes a long time to take this satellite, the Webb, to point it at back to a star where a transit's going to happen, observe the transit, then go back. And so that's hard to do. Anyway, they're looking for biosignature gases such as ozone, which means there's oxygen that isn't so obvious from there. Okay, now I'm going to start getting to some real data. Yeah. Okay. TRAPPIST system, flat. It's 9% of the sun's mass, very small orbit. And they've done studies and they've looked for TRAPPIST 1c, and there's no clear evidence of a atmosphere. They're also trying 1e. Now, whether 1e has its atmosphere blown away or not, who knows? Now we come to star K2-18. And just as I was doing this, I got an email from a friend who took a beautiful picture of the Heart and Soul Nebula. Poetry. And now we talk about K2-18. It's too bad we can't keep up more poetry. But anyway, it's got a moon called B, 32-day period, and it's 2.6 our radius and 8.6 our mass, which means it's about half the density of Earth. And how can you get that One theory is it might have a rocky core, a water ocean, and then a hydrogen atmosphere. And the article is saying maybe this is the sort of place where there's life. And they've got web data from that particular planet, and they've got methane and carbon dioxide, and they say maybe there's dimethyl sulfide, but I'm skeptical with the data, but it could be there's life on that sort of planet that's different from what they're talking about. Anyway, I found it interesting, so thank you very much.
So my wife Liz and I are very avid eclipse chasers. Our philosophy is that for a total eclipse of the sun, you should go anywhere in the world. My philosophy is that for an annular eclipse, you should go if it's on your continent. And for a partial eclipse, you should go if it's in your neighborhood or if it's within a one-day drive. So this eclipse was in North America. So by my criteria, we should go there. So why did we go to Utah? Well, Liz and I have been in most of the states, and Utah's by far our favorite. It has huge open skies, low population, extremely dark skies, and utterly spectacular scenery. We've been there before and we wanted to go there again. So you can see a delicate arch on the left and also on the logo of Utah and landscape arch. So we flew to Denver, rented a car, drove to Moab in southeastern Utah. Moab is right at the gateway of Arches National Park, one of the most popular parks in the United States. You need reservations to get there. I reserved our spot months and months in advance, and we had really good weather there. We also decided to go to Utah because the weather prospects were very good, like 20% chance only of cloud, 80% chance of clear skies. So this is Arches National Park. And it's also beside Canyonlands National Park, which is where we were going to observe the eclipse. Now, I wonder if any of you know which picture here is not in Utah. Any takers? Right. That's Monument Valley, the Navajo Indian Reserve, only a few kilometers south of the Arizona-Utah state line. Yeah, good going, guys. Okay, so we've seen the path of the eclipse again. And there's the path in Utah. So we observed from Bucks Canyon Overlook. Now, it's very close to the northern limit. On the center line, the eclipse was 4 minutes and 26 seconds. And near the northern limit, it's like seconds or a minute or very, very short. So why? For a total eclipse, you want to be on the center line. You want to have the longest totality possible, but not for an annular eclipse. If you're in the path of annularity and the sun is 88% of the sun is covered, it'll be covered whether you're on the central line or near the limit. But if you want to see Bailey's beads, you know, the dancing of the light and mountains of the moon, you want to be at the northern limit. And eclipse purists are now going to the limits of the eclipse for annular eclipses, but not for total eclipses. So that's why we picked this spot after much research in Canyonlands National Park. Here's a very out of scale, but correct geometric representation of the annular eclipse. Sun on the right, moon in the middle, earth on the left.
Is that you?
Yeah, that's an observer at the northern limit. So anywhere between those two lines on the earth, you're going to see an annular eclipse. Now, if you're at the northern limit, as you can see from the diagram, you're going to see the southern part of the moon graze the sun. In 2012, when we were near the Grand Canyon for an annular eclipse, we were at the southern limit. However, the southern part of the moon has more mountains than the northern part. So the beading would be more spectacular if you were near the north limit. So that's our rationale for going to this particular location, to Buck Canyon Overlook. This is the one picture I didn't get permission of, but I gave the correct, the person who took the picture. Imagine you're looking at the sun for 3 minutes through a large telescope and you're seeing beads. There's a big magnification of them on the right. And constantly they're changing, like in real time, you're seeing bright spots appear, then disappear. Dark mountains appear, get longer, then disappear as the moon is grazing that edge of the sun for 3.5 minutes. It's just the most wonderful sight with large magnification through a telescope. That's what we decided we really want to do, because we did that in 2012 near the Grand Canyon, the other eclipse. So there's Buck Canyon overlook. So the eclipse was 4.5, like more than 4.5 minutes long at the central line. Near the northern limit, you're getting less and less and less. So from Zeiler's map, it looks like we would get about 35 seconds of annularity. We're only 2 miles from the gray zone. Like in the gray zone, you're seeing a broken ring all the time. However, eclipse chasers, after many people whose reports I read who were within that far from the limit as I was, all say that they saw only a broken ring. None of them saw a complete ring if they were within 5 miles of the gray zone. And in fact, we did not witness a full unbroken ring at any time in the area where we were, even though the prediction was about 35 seconds or so. There's Buck Canyon overlook. It's a really beautiful area. You walk to the end there where that tree is, and there's a sheer drop, a cliff of like 1,500 feet straight down into the Colorado Valley. It's in Canyonlands National Park. Beautiful area, as I mentioned. Now, 3 days before, like the weather prospects were really good. However, a weather system had moved through. Jay Anderson is writing about this on his emails. He was telling people, well, maybe everybody better go to Texas because Nevada, Utah are going to have clouds. We had this huge thunderstorm on April 11th. The next day we went to Arches Park and it was beautiful weather. And even the evening before the eclipse, I was still really sweating, big probability of clouds. So we drive to Buck Canyon Overlook at 5 a.m. We get there at 5:30. We have half an hour of the darkest, like Bortle, whatever you want to call it, skies. It's 7,000 feet, no light pollution. It's beautifully clear. Venus is there. You can see the zodiac light dome underneath it, the whole winter Milky Way stretching. And there's sunrise and dawn. And here we are. Our equipment is the teleview and binoculars with filters. Liz and I made the decision that we are not going to image this eclipse. We're going to observe it. You can look at all kinds of videos and see these dancing of these light spots in the mountains of the moon. It's just beautiful. But to look through a telescope with high magnification at 60 times, it's just unbelievable. It was very cold, about 3 degrees, and it turned colder during the eclipse. Liz's brother, Mike, who Randy might remember, was in 1979 in Gimli, one of the people you couldn't identify. He came with his girlfriend, so 4 of us observed using this one telescope, and we all had filtered binoculars. There we are again, observing it. I couldn't resist taking my cell phone, just pointing it at the camera and getting a couple of shots. So these are sort of the best crappy shots that I got. You could see that the eclipse is annular. It's not going to completely cover the sun. There we're eating lunch. On the lower left, you can see a few crescents, but also look at the sharp shadows. When you have a crescent sun, you've got blurring in one direction, but very sharp in another direction. You can see that. Like in the tripod thing, you can see how thick it is up here at top, but it's less thick in this direction, there and there. So these are sharp shadows in one direction, very typical of a deep crescent-like eclipse. There's a lot of publicity for the eclipse. Most of the national monuments we went to did mention something about it. Coronado National Monument, where it was partial in Colorado, at that sign. There was a ring of fire posters everywhere. Gift shops in parks were closed so that during the actual eclipse time, which is 10:31, and there were signs on the roads warning people of traffic. Now, of course, we didn't witness this because we left from Moab to Canyonlands at 5 a.m. and there's really no traffic at all the way we did it. The day before the eclipse at Canyonlands, a ranger had a solar viewer and eclipse information. In our hotel, you could buy eclipse glasses, there's a lot of them, and there was a little handout talking about the eclipse. So everybody knew about it. People knew about the eclipse in April. People were talking about it. There was huge crowds in Moab. The hotels were all full. Liz is at the bottom there with eclipse glasses and a postcard that we bought. The day after the eclipse, we go to Natural Bridges and National Monument. Now, I've learned that during eclipse expeditions, you can be anywhere in the world and suddenly, like in Turkey and Finland and Bolivia, you're going to see somebody that you've seen before during an eclipse. And there's Michael Gill, the head of he leads the solar eclipse mailing list chat group. He's seen a lot more eclipses than I have. He goes to every single one, and his wife, Mandy, a good friend of mine that I've known for many years. And there they were in Natural Bridges. I had no idea. They had this big RV. And, we were really happy to see each other for that little while. Now, another coincidence in Denver when we were leaving in Toronto, we were leaving for Denver. At the airport, somebody comes and says, Chris Malicki. So I look around and he's looking at me. Do I know who he is? Yes, David Makepeace. So he's there with his girlfriend flying to Denver and then going to Albuquerque, and he's going to image the eclipse. So we saw him there. David Makepeace has kindly permitted me to use his images. He's a filmmaker, very well known. He's got a great website. I have 7 images that he took from Albuquerque. He had a ring that was not fully symmetrical, sort of a lopsided ring. I asked him to send me pictures of showing Bailey's beads. So anyways, these are progressions of the eclipse, the 7 images. Here you see beading, like 2 seconds. If you're looking at this through a telescope, 2 seconds later, you can see those bright beads move, new ones form, the black mountains come in, becoming bigger, getting smaller, just so dynamic and beautiful and interesting to see. So they're just like, look at the difference. Like these are probably just seconds apart. Okay, we're almost done. And there's the end of annularity for him. And thank you, everybody.
Okay, great. Chris, that was fantastic. And I think it's our presentations are going to complement each other a little bit, because I was in Texas, but I was closer to the center line, not right on the center line. But you've given me a good tip for next time. That's a good way to really catch those beats.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to talk a little bit about some technical specs on the eclipse and the site selection, and then I'll show you some of the wide angle photography and telephoto photography. And if we have time at the end, I made a video of the entire eclipse that lasts for 100 seconds, and I don't know if it's going to play well or not here, but we'll try. I'll talk to you. Okay, yeah. So I think all of you know this already, I think, with this audience, but the difference between an annular and a total is in an annular eclipse, the moon is at a distant part of its elliptical orbit. And so it's too small visually in the sky to cover the sun. So I think all of you know that. And so that's what's different really with a total solar eclipse. And here a similar drawing to what Chris showed in his hand drawing one. The part of the shadow that's hitting the Earth is not that darkest part of the umbral shadow that you get in a total solar eclipse. And so what you see is the ring of fire, so to speak, if you're close to the center line. So this was Sarah Series 134, member 44 of that out of 71 in that series. You've seen the path already crossed really most of the continental United States and then down in through Central and South America. Greatest eclipse was just off the coast of Nicaragua. And from where I was, if you like. Oh, no, I'm okay. Okay. Yeah, no, thank you though. So where I was in Kerrville, it was kind of a midday event centered kind of around noon. There's another view of the entire path. So site selection. So all the photography, that's my series across the top there too, and we'll talk about how I took that a bit later. So site selection, I went with a buddy of mine who was one of my partners in my Arizona dark sky site, and he lives in North Carolina. So he's made the drive across to Arizona many times from North Carolina, and so he was familiar with this little town called Kerrville, Texas, which is a very lucky little town because it happens to be on both paths. For this round, it was about 30 miles off of the center line. So the path of annularity was about 120 miles wide-ish. And so 60 would be in the middle. This little town was about 30 miles in, so about halfway into the center line. Next year, though, it will be almost right on the center line. And so it's a very lucky little town that's going to be able to cash in, so to speak, on both eclipses. So we stayed at this little hotel, and I just threw this picture in there. Notice the sign out front that says welcome, it's pet friendly. So note to self, if in the future, if I don't have to stay in a pet friendly hotel, I might not stay in a pet friendly hotel. There's a certain level of grime that comes with that. But I digress into first world problems. It was fine. It worked out fine. So he and another one of his buddies met my wife and I there. And so my wife took this picture. So we went the day before the eclipse. So we arrived on the 12th. And so that left us with the 13th to kind of explore the area and think about where we wanted to be set up. We weren't near as organized as Chris said, knowing precisely where we wanted to be. So we just kind of looked around in the town to see what was going on. So the town was preparing, all of its central parks had activities going on. This was the largest central park in the middle of town. Lots of preparations for the next day. NASA was there setting up a tent, lots of displays being set up. They knew that they would have quite a few people come out to that park on the day of the annular eclipse, but they also knew that next year they'll have an awful lot more on April 8th, being so close to the center line and a town that's big enough to have lots of hotels and stuff. So the traffic and the incoming number of people into that town next year will be huge. So the town was really kind of treating this one as a dry run or almost a dress rehearsal, planning their facilities and setting up things and figuring out how they're going to run things in April. So there's a picture of us with a huge set of solar glasses, which by the way, were not solar glasses. So they were pointing them north, which was good, so that nobody's stupid enough to try to look at the sun through those. So one spot that I had noticed when I was researching a little bit around this town is there's a guy that some decades ago built a 90% scale replica of Stonehenge. And it's not in Kerrville, it's in a small town called Ingram, but I found it on the internet. And I thought that would be a pretty cool backdrop to put a row of wide angle time lapse. So we went out there to explore that too. And they were preparing as well. You can see in the picture with the tree. Where's the mouse here? You can see, oh, okay. Yeah, you can see in the picture with the tree, you see this orange snow fence here. So they had put that up, and their plan was to have all the observers would be behind that snow fence so that they would have this view of Stonehenge. And then you wouldn't have all kinds of tripods and people in front of you. You'd have a clear shot of the eclipse over top of Stonehenge. So pretty good strategy. But they were selling tickets for the event, mostly because of limited parking. They were sold out long ago. So we were there the day before. It was kind of neat to see, kind of a cool thing. But I thought that would be a pretty cool place to watch the eclipse. So more on that in a sec. So in the end, after kind of walking around and checking a bunch of places in town, we ended up just doing it at the hotel. There was a large field with a green space and lots of trees at the hotel. That part of Texas, I would say, was not particularly spectacular. Certainly nothing like the Utah, scenery that Chris had. It was, kind of scraggy trees and not a really spectacular scenery in that part of Texas. But we found some green space here, and it was kind of fun because during the eclipse, we had a lot of people from the neighborhood come over to talk to us, and they brought their kids over and look through our glasses and look through our filtered binoculars. And so it was kind of a fun kind of impromptu outreach there. In terms of weather, it was clear the day before. I took this background shot the night before, because the trick with an annular eclipse is you can't really take the background shot during the event because the sun's always up and it's always bright. So you need to take, if you're going to do a time-lapse shot, you need to take the background shots either at dusk or sunset or sunrise at some point when the sun's not in the picture. So I took this the night before. The next morning we woke up, it was cloudy. And the event started, I think about 11, I think I've got it here. Yeah, first contact was at 10:22. So it was cloudy when we got up. So I was glad I took the shots the night before for the background. But we were lucky. By about 10:05, the last of the clouds cleared away, and then we had clear blue skies for the entire event. So that was great. So one thing I always do when I'm preparing for these things is I have a plan. So what you're looking at here is my plan with the telephoto system, and then the far right column is the wide angle system. All the camera settings I'm going to use. How am I going to set the intervalometer? What are the key specs up here? And then most importantly, what's the plan for the event? When are the contact times? What am I going to be doing during those contact times? And then I usually practice with the camera setups once or twice in Oakville before getting on the plane, just to make sure I'm ready and I've got the equipment that I need. So let's take a look at some of the photography then. So the wide angle photography, I had 2 DSLR systems I was running that day. And then we had down here in the bottom, you can see a pair of filtered binoculars there. So visual, we were using glasses and binoculars for the most part. But I had two camera systems. So this one for wide angle was a Canon 6D DSLR camera with a 32mm wide angle lens on it. I set the intervalometer to take exposures every 5 minutes for the entire event, shooting at 400 ISO and f/16 with just a neutral density filter on the camera. If you look closely, you'll see that there's a bunch of bungee cords on this camera. So something always goes wrong on an eclipse trip. If that doesn't happen, then it's not an eclipse trip. So what happened with me was somewhere along the way during the flight, I lost the little plate that attaches the camera to the top of the tripod, which makes the tripod virtually useless. And I figured this out the day before, not enough time to order something from Amazon. So we went to Home Depot and bought some little tiny bungee cords, and I just strapped it on. And you'll see from the results in a minute, it worked. I survived. So a little bit of improvising there. But that was the system for the wide angle photography. So here's the scenery, the background scene that I shot the night before when I had nice clear skies and the sun was setting and get the blue skies. But that is the string of suns shot through the entire event at 5-minute intervals. And you can see annularity in the middle. Now the only thing I did in terms of artistic license with this, and Chris will know this because he observed it and he knew how high this event was. This event was happening very high in the sky. So at annularity, the sun was at about 46 degrees. So on this frame with a 32, the sun would have actually been about here. So I would have really only gotten about half of it. So of course I knew that was going to happen. I thought about going really, really wide angles so that I don't have to take that artistic license, but then the suns would just be little tiny dots, right? So what I did was I shot at 32, the background, and then I shifted the camera up so that the sun would start in the bottom left corner of the frame, run for the 3 hours. I'd get the whole eclipse. So what I had to do for artistic license, that's all as it came out of the camera, but I had to shift it down about this much. To get it to fit on the frame with the background. So then right after the event, the other 2 guys headed for the airport. My wife and I stayed 1 extra night. And so that evening, the evening of the eclipse, with the eclipse all over, we went back out to the Stonehenge site. And by then there was nobody there. Everybody had left. So I stood right behind that orange fence, took the background shot that I would have done. And so here it is. So obviously some artistic license on this. It's the same set of suns shifted down again. But if you had been at that site, this is approximately what you would have observed looking out over what looks like Stonehenge in Texas. So then the telephoto photography is where the sequence on the top came from. So there I was shooting with a 70D DSLR with a 600 millimeter L series telephoto lens, and I mounted the whole thing on a Skywatcher Adventurer to track. I've never really had a lot of luck at getting accurate polar alignment in a daytime setup, so it wasn't perfect. It was close enough, not bad. But about every 5 minutes or so, I would just have to give it just a little bit of an adjustment to keep the sun centered in the frame. But I ran video for the entire event with that kind of approximate tracking. And then every 20 minutes, I would take it off of video and shoot a quick series of still shots. The quality and the resolution is a little bit better through a DSLR on stills than video. So every 20 minutes, I would rattle off another set of stills and then throw it back on video again. Shooting at about 200 ISO and f11, again with a neutral density filter and bracketed exposures. So coming out of the camera on that is this sequence first. And this is kind of as it really comes out of the camera and as it was observed, if you were looking through binoculars or if you were looking with a camera that's level to the ground, the moon was approaching from the upper right, crossing over the sun, getting to annularity, and then continuing to cross over. And this is the same photo, just with the labels taken off at the bottom. But I think the things that I like about this sequence, and it shows the differences from a total solar eclipse, is first these really long horns that you get. You don't see that in a total solar eclipse. As the moon comes across, it's just kind of the crescent tightens up and then you're into totality. You don't see those long horns like that on both sides. And then of course in an annular eclipse, you don't see the corona around you see the ring of fire instead. And if you look closely, you can see that the moon is not perfectly centered over the sun during annularity, and that's because we weren't right on the center line. We were about 30 miles off the center line. I expect if we had been on the center line, it would have been dead center. So I always find that one a little bit disorganized for my finance brain. So if I take each of the images and just rotate it about 45 degrees clockwise, then you can get to a sequence that looks like this. And just a little bit more symmetry to the photo and more typical of what you see flying around the internet on this type of photography. So then another one that I did, I had a lot of data from that video and all the stills that I took every 20 minutes. So in this one, what I wanted to try to do was capture the middle 6 minutes of the event, 3-hour event. I just want the middle 6 minutes in this one. And so the center is a still photo during totality or during annularity. So that's a still. And then I went to the video and I backed off I found a spot on the video where I was kind of like at second contact, where the complete ring was there. You didn't have any breakages in the ring. So consider that one to be second contact. And then I just backed up 10 seconds all the way back. So this is capturing like second contact and about 1 minute before second contact at 10-second intervals. And so you can see that the horns are really far apart here, but they get tighter and tighter and tighter. You start to pick up a little bit of Bailey's beads as it gets in close, and some breakage in here with some Bailey's beads appearing. Then you get to second contact, and then the same thing on the other side as it emerges. Now here I didn't mess with the rotation here. This is the way it looked. So you can see the moon is coming in from the upper right, and that's how you see that cone closing in like that as the moon comes in from the upper right. And then as the moon exits, you're not going to see that those Bailey's beads on the left side. You're going to see them at the bottom, and that's exactly what you see, right? So you can see the Bailey's beads starting to form. This would have been third contact, and here you can see Bailey's beads forming until you're well past third contact, and the horns are starting to appear again. So that's a one that I put together with a combination of stills and then snaps off the video. And then this one is just a simpler one that just grabs two of the ones with the long extended horns, and then those were taken off the video as well. And then the center one is a single still, but it's a good one to show the ring of fire and the long horns. So then a couple other things that we'll try looking at this video. So I did take a picture on a nearby sidewalk. Here's the crescents that were discussed a bit earlier tonight. And so they were really, really obvious. This was just after annularity. And so you're almost seeing complete circles from the pinhole camera of the leaves. And then this is one that one of our members, Raghav, I think, sent an email out to everybody on the day of the eclipse saying he had found this on the internet. And this was taken by their NOAA satellite that shows the shadow crossing the United States. And at this point, I took grab that one because I think it's fairly centered on Texas at that point. But that's where I was when I was shooting all this stuff. And that's what the Earth looked like at that point. So we can try this video. I don't know if it's going to work. So I made a video that collapses the whole event into 100 seconds. Now it's bumpy. It's not professional. It's very bumpy at the first because remember I said that I had to adjust the tracking about every 5 minutes. Well, that's every 300 seconds. So I'm going to run the video, but the first part of the video is going to be at 300 times speed. So those little bumps are going to happen every second, right? So it's going to be a little bumpy at the beginning. But then I slow it down in the middle so you can see that the most important parts are a lot slower and a lot clearer, and then it'll be bumpy again at the end. So I'm going to exit out of this. Don't know if I'll need help on this or not. We'll try to go to the other file now.
Okay.
Let her go. Let her rep.